Hey, everybody. Good afternoon and welcome to Think Business CEO Edition. Gabe and I are looking forward to connecting and talking with David Goldman, founder, recruiter, Ruby Peak Recruiting. David, recruiting is one of my favorite topics to talk about. I'm a big believer that you cannot grow a great company without great people. I'm a believer that people should be recruiting all the time, not just reactively when they're in a panic mode, and that recruiting should be part of every business plan. And unfortunately, I don't really think it is. So welcome to the show, and I'm looking forward to connecting with you. Let's kind of start here. Talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing from a recruiting standpoint and where you are really focusing a lot of your time from a niche perspective right now.
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Recruiting, that is my language and something I'm passionate about. As far as what we're seeing right now, you're speaking specifically to the pandemic.
No, yes and no. Yeah.
Look, I always find with recruiting, one person, one job. There's always an opportunity out there for someone. There's never, people ask me, how is the market right now in this time or that time? And that's usually my comeback is, look, you're only looking for one job. So the job is out there. There are always a ton to choose from. What we're seeing right now is a move to remote. So, in some ways it has changed the recruiting landscape, both from ability to interview candidates, and the ability to see clients and spend time with them. It hasn't really affected the process much after that, though, at all. The recruiting business is still busy as ever. It's not a fad. It always sounds cliche to say that, companies really are only as good as their people. And so I don't know if that answers your question, but recruiting is the same as it has ever been, with maybe some more tech tricks and tech tools thrown in.
That's great. We've talked about in the past, the interviewing process and how important it is for not only the person who's doing the hiring to be able to manage the actual interview in a certain way, but also for the candidate. And you've given some interesting perspectives on that in the past. And I think no matter what side of that equation you're on, it's relevant. Do you mind just jumping into that?
Yeah, happy to jump into that. Recruiting strategy is something that you see and hear about all the time, books about, and people practicing and rehearsing interview questions and fielding tough questions. I think that there is definitely a strategy that I have found in the last 20 years to recruiting for conducting an interview from the candidate perspective that works very well. And works, when I say works very well, it works for raising the odds that a candidate will actually get to offer stage, and also raising the odds that the company will make an authentically solid hire. So it kind of works for both ends. I tend to think that the best interview strategy is one that is where the candidate stays on pace for relevance. We look at job openings as kind of a problem that a company needs to solve, right? So the more a candidate can speak directly to the problem they are trying to solve, as opposed to, and what we see a lot are people coming out trying to sound like a Jack or Jill of all trades, hire me because I'm smart, I'm versatile, I'm ambitious, I can do all these myriad things. I find at the end of the day, relevance for the job at hand is the best place to start. And Gabe, you and I have talked about this a little bit offline, this part about two different styles that candidates kind of take, whether they intend to and are doing it consciously or not. We kind of find that the two strategies for interview are one that I call the let's have all the cards on the table, a kind of a two-way street interview where the candidate is interviewing the company as much as the company is interviewing the candidate. And let's turn over all the stones and see if this is a good mutual fit so we don't waste anyone's time. The other strategy that people take is more of the audition strategy. It's to think, I don't have this job yet, but I made it to the audition, e.g. the interview. I know what they're looking for. I have an idea of what they're looking for. So I'm going to audition for the role. And I may have questions about whether or not I'm going to take this job if I get an offer. But until I get to that place, this is not a two-way street. In a perfect world, it would be. It would be like over coffee, it might be a two-way street. Let's have a conversation, see if we're a good fit. But in an interview situation, it's not a two-way street until a candidate gets an offer. So we have found that it makes more sense to set the pace and instruct our candidates to have an honest, authentic interview, unrehearsed, but specifically relevant to what the client's needs are in the role, and audition for the role and save their questions for a later time. Maybe that's, getting close to offer, but more times than not, it's after the offer stage. I don't know, Gabe, if that speaks to your general question.
It does. I mean, what is interesting to me is the idea that of the two approaches to an interview, one of them is where the candidate can be a little more directive in the interview itself, going in with the attitude of, I need to interview them as much for this job as they're interviewing me. And as conventional wisdom may be that the person doing the hiring may like that in terms of, this person is, I don't necessarily have this person like hook, line, and sinker yet. And, they're demonstrating some ownership over this process that I appreciate because that's what I'm going to want them to do when they get here. And that is a conventional wisdom I've had in the past. But I mean, what you're saying is no, that generally does not.
That was embarrassing.
That's a candidate calling to get an audition.
Right.
No idea how to turn that.
Right, go ahead, Gabe. Yeah.
So that's an interesting point. You know what I think that companies or hiring managers like about that style, that might feel right about that style, is, if I'm guessing, I haven't thought about this until now, I think those people are taking a very authentic approach. In other words, they have burning questions. They want to know that they're moving in the right direction. So they have a real need to not be scripted and to be authentic in their questions and how they're thinking, what can this company do for me? That's a very personal drive. And you're right to think that can be attractive to a company, kind of knowing what they're getting. Who is this person? And getting to know them quickly. It's true if you take an audition, and this is where a lot of people this is the misconception where my strategy can be misconstrued. The audition strategy of, here's what I can do for you. Let's wait and see about what you can do for me until we get to offer stage, but here's what I can do for you. People have a tendency to do that incorrectly by scripting it out and saying what they think hiring managers, the person interviewing them, wants to hear.
Yeah.
Whereas in your case, what you're describing is somebody who's thrown that part out the window and just wants to have a conversation. So I agree that having a conversation is always, an unscripted conversation is always a better tactic and a better interview style. However, and Gabe, to your point, there are people who will tell me, well, I've taken the two-way street interview and interviewed companies, plenty, and I've gotten the offer before. So I don't believe you that your other strategy works better. And what I tell those people is, it's because that's fine, but it's because you got lucky that nobody else with your same credentials, achievements, background, experience, nobody else showed up with those same skills and attributes and took the audition interview and did it in a way that was also authentic, where they weren't scripted, but they had an honest conversation, because that can be done. And when it's done, there is no question. I have never heard, here's what happens. The company will call and say, look, we had two finalists, both were exceptional. One took, they may not call it this, but one took strategy A, and look, we probably couldn't go wrong with that person. One took strategy B. We had honest conversations with both of them. But you know what? Strategy A, now depending on what kind of role they're going after, because there could be some exceptions, strategy A, not sure how flexible they are. It seems like if things don't go exactly their way, we don't know if we can accommodate them. They may be out of here, as opposed to, and here's the ironic part, as opposed to they say, so we think it's a safer hire to go with the audition. They don't call it the audition person.
Yeah.
It's strategy B. We think they're a safer bet. They seem a little bit easier to be around, a little bit easier to deal with. Ironically, what happens is when they get to offer stage, that person can turn into person A, and they can now, with the safety of an offer, have that two-way street interview. And I find the hiring managers are even more prone to want to have that honest dialogue about what we can do for you. So that's been my experience.
Let me thank you for that that download. That was interesting, and I enjoyed listening to that. But now I want to talk about after the hire, right? And to me, one of the biggest things about hiring is that the person that you interviewed 2, 3, 4 times, phone screen, personality test, this, that, and the other, that they actually show up and they keep showing up. Well, A, you hope that they show up for the first couple weeks, but that they show up on month 6 when the real training and understanding of everything is really there. And so what do you look as a recruiter? What are you asking, and what characteristics are you looking for the long-term hold of a person? Not that they're going to be there for life, but that the person, not to repeat myself, but that the person you're interviewing actually shows up.
Sure. I think the number one answer there is to be truly a curious person during the interview process. Do not accept generalities. And, if you're not just inherently a curious person, you may not make a great recruiter. Because when people give you, first of all, you have to detect when people are speaking in script. There's something I call interview speak. When you are in an interview and somebody says, I reside in so-and-so, or I have a vehicle, I can get to so-and-so, you instantly, I think to myself, okay, I understand this person wants to make a great impression and they're trying to present professionally, but it's telling me that they're thinking too hard about how they're talking and what they're saying. Maybe I'm not getting the authentic version of this person. And if I can catch the fact that they never use the word vehicle in everyday conversation, then maybe what else are they telling me that is not really authentic, right? So if I can break them down and hear them, I would rather have people stumble over their words than than try and find the perfect word, because I feel like those people could be really posturing in the entire interview. It might be the strategy. The second thing is, when you hear answers to questions like, I'll give you an obvious one, why'd you leave job so-and-so? Not a good fit, or for a better opportunity. Yeah. Well, if you're not following up on those questions, in a real sincere way, I might have, not 2 or 3 follow-up questions, but that may lead down the biggest rabbit hole of all. I may have 9 follow-up questions on there, and I want them to tell in an honest way, without trying to trick or trap them, vulnerable stories that are hard to tell, not right.
Absolutely.
So I cannot stress that, enough.
I'm curious, what are some red flags, statements that candidates make that sound great generically, but is a red flag for the person doing the interviewing?
Certainly anything, when you hear people talk about, we hear people talk about toxic environments, I left because it was a toxic environment, this and that, at some point it becomes very clear that in many cases, people who are complaining about, toxic environments or other coworkers who were doing this and that and the other thing, more times than not, they were the problem.
Yeah.
Candidates. I hate to say that, but I really have found that, and that's been corroborated with reference calls as well. Certainly a red flag. Again, other red flags are just like anything that smells scripted, because if you can sniff out one scripted answer, it means the rest of it is scripted too. They maybe are just doing a better job.
I love what you're talking about as far as all of this. It's one of the reasons I love doing live interviews, because there is no script. You mess up, you mess up. It is what it is. It's as real and authentic as could be. And but I love what you're talking about when it comes to interviews, because I find that I just want to dive into asking vulnerable stories, right? So, because you're right, when somebody says it wasn't a fit, the culture wasn't there, I don't know. I'm always thinking to myself, or sometimes I say, let's pretend you're not confused. What would what would the answer be, right? And so, how do you? Because I think this is here. Let me just rewind for 1 second. I think a lot of times in companies do not invest in recruiters. They find the person at their company that's the least busy but still overworked, and they say, we're in a bind, go hire someone. They go to a platform, they get a couple resumes, they hire someone who's good, not great, and it ends up costing them a lot of time, money, heartache, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, because they don't know the questions to ask at an interview, even if they're great and rock stars at whatever they do in the company, unless they're HR. And so, but even HR sometimes is not educated or trained to the extent to ask the right questions. So I think it's worth talking about really what are some of those questions. And I understand where you're coming from. They're real-time questions, and you can give the scenarios, but that's where I think people really need to raise their awareness and consciousness.
I hear you. I do not believe in scripts. I do not believe in a set of questions. I think that's sometimes where going in that kind of HR route can backfire, because people are not widgets off the shelf, right? They all have different stories to tell, and there are different aspects of their history that might be more relevant and helpful for you to know. So I am a get people talking type of recruiter, and I never have a set list of questions. I do want to, oftentimes I will try and personalize it by talking about their I say relationship with their boss, not necessarily their personal relationship with their boss, but their dynamic with their boss or with their, and I will ask them, what are the names? I say, well, remind me, what was your boss's name again? They'll say, Betty. I'll say, okay, Betty, we're sitting right here. And I'll try and bring Betty into the room so that conversation becomes more personal. I mean, it's really fascinating if you ask someone that question about even the generic ones, like what would your boss say about you? Yeah. Versus if you say, what was your boss's name? And we brought Betty, and we say, if Betty were sitting right in this chair next to you, people will straighten up, like, Betty's there, I better not lie to Betty. Yeah. So if you can use that same mentality, ask them to give people's names. Now that's actually, I also, that's good. I love that. When you're interviewing, don't name drop, and also don't say, oh, when I worked for John or when I worked for Bob. No one knows who these people are. Yeah. Use titles when you're talking about your past experience. Only use titles, don't use people's names. However, if I want to personalize it, I will then ask, what's the person's name? And it flips a switch that I love that. Like I said before, it makes it more personal, and you'll start learning all kinds of things when you get into the dynamic. Because unless you're talking about an engineering job where code is code and just give me the code. If you can't give me the code, you're out of here. And I don't do technical recruiting for a reason. Doesn't interest me. Yeah. Because I can't, there's no onion to peel back. It's binary, right? So that's.
Do you, you talk about asking questions that open up vulnerabilities. I in the past, I'm just curious as your take on this, have asked questions like, aside from personal death and that sort of thing, what's the worst thing that's happened to you? To hear how the kinds of things they talk about, and whether they put themselves as sort of the victim of the story, or they put themselves as the person who really tried to do, I don't want to, I'm curious to hear what you have to say and how you advise people.
When you're talking about stories that are difficult for candidates to tell, right? And they feel the smart ones know when they're opening a can of worms. Like, some of them will just tell you everything, right? And so that's kind of TMI out of the gates, right? But for those who understand that they have some tough stories to tell, there are two ways to look at it. I mean, on the one hand, sometimes people will be very cagey about not wanting to tell me a story of something that happened at work, the real reason they left or whatever it is. And if I kind of egg them on and make them feel safe and comfortable and make them understand, look, I'm on you. We're a team. The more I know about what hasn't worked for you, the better I can help as a recruiter to try and place you in an environment that goes in a direction that you actually will thrive in, right? Sometimes when I hear those stories, when they finally come clean and tell me like, okay, I would never tell anyone this, but here's the real deal. I oftentimes will say, look, that doesn't sound so bad to me at all. You actually told it in a realistic way. I don't think you're passing judgment. You're sharing information. And by the way, if you're telling me you really don't want to get yourself into that situation again, think of it this way. Any hiring manager or new company that can't handle that story the way you just told it, you might not want to work for them anyway. Yeah. Right? Because you maybe want to find someone who's compassionate to that story.
Yeah.
So
I love it. David, I love everything that you're talking about. Before we move into a lightning speed round,
good.
Tell everybody quickly who your ideal clients are and really where your maybe your niche market is.
Sure. So I fell into this. I started recruiting the week of 9/11, actually. Started several days after 9/11 in the Bay Area. And I walked into a recruiting firm and fell into this niche of executive assistants. So typically my clients are technology CEOs, life science, biotech CEOs, or C-team members who are looking for sharp, effective, exceptional executive assistants to support them in their everyday business environment. We also work with a lot of venture capital founders and partners, private equity founders and partners who are looking for just the best of the best people to be their right arm, their left arm, their eyes and ears, the flow of information, et cetera. And so that has been my niche for the last 20 years. Now, after doing it for so long, certainly I take on some other searches, but and I work on contingency, which is always an interesting game. So we're not retained. We only win searches if we do a better job than our clients do.
Yeah. All right, good. That's maybe a good topic for another show. I love that topic. All right, you ready? We got a 60-second lightning round. Ready?
Yes.
Favorite book and why?
Oh God, my brain doesn't work this way.
Pretend you're in an interview.
Pass. No, that's an interesting point. I'm not a candidate. I'm an entrepreneur. I haven't interviewed for a job since I was 23.
What's the best piece of advice you've ever gotten, and who gave it to you?
Best piece of advice I ever got is be yourself, be honest. And I've heard that from everyone basically that I admire is be honest, be nice, be kind. I know that sounds hokey, but at the end of the day, I'm in the relationship business and all of that comes back to me all of the time. Yeah. So do the right thing. Spike Lee gave me that.
Absolutely. Finish this sentence, David. The one thing owners need to do to raise their awareness on their recruiting needs is
take stock of their own feelings about do they have employees who are passionate about the mission and who want to be there, and if they are they satisfied with the people surrounding them in their ability to help them fulfill their mission.
All right. I love it. Tell everybody again how they can connect with you, and I just before, as you say that, because I'm going to let Gabe close, can't thank you enough. I love talking about recruiting. I know you've enlightened people, and will continue as people listen to this on the importance of recruiting, the importance of asking the right questions, the importance of digging deep at an interview, and the value that an interview is for a company. So I really appreciate you taking time to be on the show and share that. It sometimes seems so simple, it's complicated, but it's priceless. So I appreciate it. And thanks for taking time. Gabe, I'll let you close after David tells everybody one more time how to connect with him.
Thank you. You can reach me directly at david@rubypeakrecruiting.com. rubypeakrecruiting.com is the website, but feel free to send me an email. I'll take them all. You can also and thanks. This is all tip of the iceberg stuff. I could literally have this conversation for endlessly. So
I love it.
Well, awesome. It's great insight. And I wish we did have more time to talk about sort of digging into that, but it's fantastic. And David, I love you. So it's always good. It's always good to see you talk. And
good to see you guys. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Good. All right. Thanks, everybody. Think community, if David can help you, please reach out to him, rubypeakrecruiting.com. Gabe, always great co-hosting with you. David, thanks so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.